Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie, and this channel is where I share with you my works in progress, finished projects, things I'm cooking up, books I'm reading, funny things my kids may say. My hope is that as you watch this episode and the previous episodes that you find some inspiration along the way. This is episode 134. End of October year 2024, and I am coming to you from a beautiful autumnal day here in Minnesota where I live with my husband and our 2 young children. It has been unseasonably warm, but I think the temps should be cooling down soon. I feel like I've said that before, maybe in the past several episodes, because typically in October we have had some snow already and we have not had any snow. In fact, it has been pretty dry, but yeah, we'll just see what happens. The way I usually organize my videos here is we have an intro welcome section. There might be a little bit of vlog footage, usually nature scenes, sometimes cooking, sometimes baking, things like that. And then we jump into finished projects, works in progress, eats and reads section, and then sometimes there is a food for thought section. And that usually has something to do with making because making is part of my 24/7 everyday life. Oftentimes something more life general related that's been weighing on my heart or in my mind and something I want to share with you. You never have to answer the question. It's never like actual homework. You can use the comment section below this video to join in on that conversation or just do it, yourself, not on the internet. That sounded super awkward. There are several make-alongs going on currently, and I will do my best to put them on the screen if I'm talking about an item that goes with a make-along and I just forget to mention the make-along, but I remember it in editing. Sometimes I don't even remember in the editing of the video to mention it, but hopefully it will be in the description box below this video as well. It's just hard to remember all the things. Speaking of the description box below this video, I do include links to the things that I talk about. They may be designers or shops, things like that. I do use Ravelry for my projects, and that's knit and crochet projects. Sewn projects are not on Ravelry, so I will link specifically to those project pages in a section in the description box below this video. I do include closed captionings on all of my videos here on YouTube. You can click on that CC button, and if I speak faster or slower than your preferences, YouTube allows you to adjust that speed. I think that is all for all those things. I do have a big pile of finished projects for you today. I just had this wind of finishing energy, and a lot of them are smaller projects, and so they don't take up as much time to finish anyway. And as we're getting closer and closer to Christmas, and I do gift knit for some very special people in my life every year. For some of the children, I have been gift knitting for them since they were born. So these are like my nieces and nephews. And so, yeah, I've just continued doing that. But of course, as they get older, sometimes the items get a little bigger, which then takes a little bit more time. Plus, I've had more nieces and nephews as the years have gone on over time. And so it is very enjoyable because I know that they like it and they appreciate it. And it's just so much fun to gift some of that love to someone who we love. Okay, are you ready? I am not sure what order I'm going to do these in, but I think maybe we'll just start with what I am wearing. Okay, finished projects. Let's start with what I am wearing. First off, I have my Bertie Parker earrings on. These are copper and sterling silver, and I just love these dangly earrings. I feel like they are a perfect neutral to really go with anything. It is just a great neutral piece of flair that I can add to anything, and I can wear my knitting with me even if I am not wearing any hand knits. I have my earrings paired with my Jethro cardigan, and I have a whole featured finished project video on that I will link here in the corner, but also it will be in the description box below this video. I wanted a dedicated space to talk about the project at length, from the details and the construction and the process to styling it. So if that is something you are curious about, I would check out that video. Here, I will just kind of give you the brief overview since all the details are there, so I'm not repeating everything again, but this cardigan is crocheted and knit, and there's a little bit of sewing involved, and I like all those three crafts, and so it was a really beautiful combination of using all those skills. You crochet these granny squares, and then depending on the size that you are making, you may have more rounds or less rounds, and you may have more squares to lengthen it or widen it. And so that is how you adjust the sizing. The pattern does come in 6 sizes, and depending on how you adjust your squares, you really have a little bit of wiggle room between those sizes, or smaller or bigger. And so you do the squares. You can join them as you go or seam them together. I did mattress stitching. I tried the join as you go. I didn't love it. I explained that in the other video, so if you're curious on that process, go there. But yeah, so after you make all your squares, you put them all together and you seam the sides up to your armhole. You pick up and you knit your sleeves, you knit your bottom ribbing, and you knit your neckband or button band. I do have buttonholes here. The fourth one, or first one, however way you're looking at it, is way too high. There's really no point in this buttonhole here. But the bottom 3 I could easily button. I probably would only button the bottom 2. Let's see if I can get up a little bit closer. I'm not sure that's in frame. And right now I don't have any buttons on it because I haven't decided what kind of buttons I want. I know they have to be bigger. I think the pattern calls for 1/2 inch buttons, but I think for me, since I did the ribbing a little bigger, I think a 1 inch or 0.75 inch button will work better. But I am in no hurry to get buttons because I primarily think I will wear this as an open front cardigan, just the way that the style fits on me. I cropped it, so I omitted 1 row of granny squares off the bottom, and I did a longer ribbing. I'm gonna turn around slowly, so hopefully you get a better view. So it is cropped. It hits above my hip bone, which is where I wanted it to be, because I wanted it to be worn with dresses. That most of my dresses have a gathered skirt bottom, and so it flares out at the hip area from the natural waist, and I didn't want the cardigan to go past that and flare out. I did do the sleeves a little bit differently in the decreases. I didn't want it to be super fitted. The pattern is designed for the sleeves to be a little more fitted, but again, as a layering piece, I didn't want there to be extra bunchiness in the sleeves, and I just don't like really fitted sleeves. And so there's just so many ways to customize this to really make it your own, from the color palette to the yarn choice. It is a DK weight pattern. I held Purl Soho's Linen Quill double, and I used the needle sizes and hook sizes recommended in the pattern. And yeah, I really love how this came to be. I used, I don't even know how many colors, 13, 15 colors, I think. And none of my squares are the same. They're all different. And I love it so much. Again, if you're looking for extra details, go to that video. I believe it's like 30-ish minutes or so. And it is all dedicated to talking about the colors, the process, the whole thing. Paired with my Jethro, I have on my I believe this is my third Tolsta tank. It's a good thing I'm talking about it now because I am getting way too hot. So this is my Tolsta tank. It is a pattern by Rebecca of the Korea Bea. I'm going to move past this bench so hopefully you get a better full view of it. We'll turn around slowly so hopefully the fit is a little more visible. I did knit mine shorter than the pattern by a couple of inches, and I made, what other modifications did I make? I made a modification to the neckline. I knit the neckline longer. I did a tubular bind off on the neckline and the armhole ribbing, and I love this fit a lot. I think it gives off similar vibes to the mini mock neck tank by Jessie Maed Designs, except knit at a different gauge, different yarn weight, and I think it's because I did this ribbing at the neckline wider or thicker, longer, bigger. I don't know. I did the neckline different. This one is knit bottom up, and the mini mock neck tank is knit top down. I mean, they're totally different patterns in the finishing and everything. I just feel like the way I wear both of them is the same because I wear them as an underlayer. However, this one has more coverage here around the what's the word I'm looking for? Armhole area. And so I can comfortably wear this without another layer over it. Plus, this one is not designed to have negative ease. You could have 0 to like, I think 3 or 4 inches of positive ease. And I knit the first size, which gives me, I want to say 0 or 1 inch of positive ease. And the gauge for this is 17 stitches by 27 rounds. The recommended needles are US 1, which is a 4mm, and that is for the ribbing, and the US 8 for the 5mm. Of course, use whatever needles gets you gauge. I had a really fun time with this because I held 2 yarns from the Farmer's Daughter Fiber Sock Squad sock set double. I didn't hold the mini, I just held the main yarns, and so this is what I have left. This is a very light fingering weight yarn at 463 yards for 100 grams, and it is their Bighorn sock base, which is a 75% 19.5 micron superwash merino and 25% nylon. Here are the yarns that I have remaining. You can see that they are a similar shade of blue, definitely in the same color family. And the lighter one, or slightly more muted one, is from October, called the Borrowers. And it's definitely more of a semi-solid tonal feel. There are lights and dark of the same color in there. Almost like a washed light denim. And then the July one had something to do with riding a bike and roller skates. Something to do with riding a bike and roller skates. I don't remember exactly, but that was from July, and this one is definitely a brighter turquoise with some speckling. And held together, they make a beautiful blue that has a little bit of depth and variation in it. I'm going to stand up and hopefully be a little bit closer so that you can see the fabric. Even knit at a 17 stitch gauge, it is not too gapey. I feel like my armholes are at a good depth where it isn't drooping, but it also isn't so high that it is uncomfortable. And so again, this is knit with 0 ease bust circumference for me, and it's very comfortable. The pattern does not give you a stitch count for picking up for the neckband or the armhole ribbing, and I think that's just something that you get to play around with to customize the fit for you. And I found the numbers that I worked out to fit my body really well, and so I plan on continuing to use those numbers for future ones. And yes, I do plan on knitting future ones because I find this piece to be so versatile. So I had 100 grams of each of those yarns, and I ended up using 176 grams of yarn, which is 814 yards. And I did have some yarn left over. Again, this is a light fingering weight yarn. When I have made this previously with a 400 yards per 100 gram yarn, I used, I think, almost both, like full amounts of both hanks that I had to start with, and I feel like that one was closer to 200 gram used total. That fabric is a little denser than this one because that weight of yarn was a little bit heavier than this one, so 463 yards for 100 grams compared to 400 yards for 100 grams can make a big difference. So just something to keep in mind if you're going to hold yarns double to create something like this, that it's going to eat up more yarn depending on your yarn weight. As far as pattern stats go, there are 10 sizes available and multiple different options for the top section. So I believe this is the vest version. There's one where it's a V-neck in front and in back. There's one that has a square neckline with thinner straps as well. And so since they are all started bottom up with the same stitch count, it just gives you some time to think about what you want by the time you finish the body section. My tip for you regarding this bottom up tank is that if you aren't sure how long you want that body to be, do a provisional cast on, and then you can knit the whole thing and then go back and finish that body how you want to, depending on how much yarn you have left. It can also be a great way to manage your yarn, if you are a little bit unsure about how much yarn that top section is going to take, then you can knit your body until you feel like it would be a comfortable length to still try on, and then do that top section and then try it on and then go back and basically finish it like a top down garment. The pattern also includes bust darts if that is something that you would like to have in your garment, and the details on what to do and if you might need them are included in the pattern. The pattern also comes in 2 gauges, so you can knit it at the 17 stitch gauge or a 24 stitch gauge with fingering weight yarn. I have not knit the fingering weight yarn option. I've only knit the DK / whatever you want to use weight that is at 17 stitches per 4 inches. Outfit change. This is the Courage Henley by Tori Yu. I test knit this pattern for Tori earlier this fall in August, September, and it was released, I think, middle of October, year 2024. So this is something that I made earlier, but just didn't have a chance to talk about it until now. This is a pattern that is designed for worsted weight yarn. The gauge is 19 stitches by 25 rows in 4 inches of stockinette on the main needles. You use a US 5 or 3.75 millimeter for the ribbing and a US 7 or 4.5 millimeter for the main fabric. Of course, use whatever needle sizes that get you gauge. The pattern is written for finished sizes of 36-inch bust circumference to 68 inches. It comes in 9 sizes, and the recommended ease is 6 to 10 inches of positive ease. I knit the second size for 8 inches of positive ease, so it's a very relaxed, almost oversized fit. On me, I feel like something closer to 10 inches and above would be considered oversized, and then fitted would be more like 0 to 2 inches maybe of positive ease and maybe a little negative ease. And then a relaxed fit would be something more like 4 to 8 inches of positive ease, somewhere in there. I know I'm like missing some numbers in there, but anyway, roughly in that range. So on me, I feel like this is borderline like relaxed to oversized fit at 8 inches of positive ease. I have like 5 inches of positive ease around the hips and then 8 inches of positive ease around the bust. The sleeves are also very relaxed, and so it makes it easy for layering or putting on a flannel shirt underneath and still being able to fold up the ends if I want to. The sleeves are full length. When I stretch my arms out, they do shrink up a little bit, but I usually wear a watch, so it isn't really a huge deal. Then I can see my watch easily. But I suppose if I really wanted it to be full length on me, I feel like usually I have to knit a little bit past the wrist, because over time that elbow stretch of the sleeves always shrinks it up. With my sweaters knit in non-superwash yarns, I feel like oftentimes they will shrink up after a lot of wear just from the natural bounce back of the yarn, which is not a bad thing. It is just something to keep in mind that if you are blocking something out to stretch it to fit, over time, sometimes it will shrink up. Now, I don't remember blocking these sleeves out particularly long, but I think just with time and wear, when you bend your elbow, some of that sweater goes into the elbow part, and so then the sleeve ends up being a little bit shorter. So I think the only thing I would do differently if I really wanted to would be to knit the sleeves maybe 2 inches longer than what the pattern has, but otherwise this is just fine because I usually wear a watch, and if I have fingerless mitts on, it covers my wrists just fine. This sweater is knit top down. It has this saddle shoulder construction, which I really like. I find it to be really tidy, although of course it does take some practice in picking up stitches for it to be nice and tidy, but you also don't end up with any underarm holes just from the sweater construction. Sometimes with top-down sweaters, especially like raglans or round yoke sweaters, you put the sleeves on hold and then you're going back to pick up. But I feel like there's a lot of strain in this underarm area and the stitches tend to get stretched out and then you tend to end up with holes. I always just duplicate stitch those holes and it's fine, but this provides a very tidy join between where the sleeve is and the body of the sweater. So I'm noticing that I really like that. There really aren't any holes to close up and there's no stretching out because the weight of the sweater isn't getting pulled or tugged in that area. A special feature is this Henley design in the front. It gives it kind of a sporty, sweatshirty vibe. I really like how it looks. I think it's very tidy. Tori gives instruction and video tutorial on how to do this Henley. Hopefully you can see it as I get up a little bit closer. I'm hoping it stays in focus. The buttons I have here are wooden buttons with laser cut floral. I bought these off of a shop on Etsy that I had not purchased from before, but I was looking for a very specific look for the buttons. I wanted something that was a little more feminine because the color I chose for the sweater is very neutral and I feel like with the sporty vibe I just wanted to balance it out a little bit. So I went with these laser cut floral buttons that are I would say warm toned brown in the wood, and I really like how it turned out. It gives a little pop, but not so much where it's distracting from the rest of the sweater. There is a schematic featured on Tori's pattern page, so you can look to see if there's a size that would work for you prior to purchasing the pattern and just to get a better idea of what the fit is supposed to be like. Something that's kind of neat is the decreases on the sleeve. I feel like typically they're all in the underarm, but this one is done on the top, and it's an actual detailed designed feature of the pattern, and I like how they look on the top. And I think that's it. I did do tubular bind offs on all of my bind offs, and I feel like I chose that for this pattern mostly because the yarn I used is really round, and so it really shows it off. Plus this special feature of the neckline is kind of a focal point, so I just thought that would just add a little bit more to it. Otherwise, typically I just do like a traditional bind off where I knit or I do a knit bind off. Oh my goodness, what is the word? I bind off this knit stitches knitwise and bind off the purl stitches purlwise. But here I did the tubular bind off on the cuffs. Hopefully that will be visible. And I did it on the neckline. And I did it on the body hem. I feel like this is a sweater length that I can wear tucked into the top of my jeans or just worn out. It does go past my hip bones. I would say it's full length, but not like super long. I don't remember what I knit my body length to. I feel like I did it all to pattern. And so let me look at the schematic real quick. The schematic body length underarm, okay, 13 inches. It's for across all sizes. Since this top section can be knit at a different depth, across all sizes, the body length from underarm to the bind off is 13 inches, which is 33 centimeters. And to me, that would be full length. And I find it really comfortable. I feel like this is an easy sweater to just throw on over anything. If it's going to be a little warm out, you can put it over a t-shirt so you can take it off later. If it's going to be really cold, I can wear a thin wool cotton long sleeve shirt underneath, or maybe a turtleneck in the winter, and that would keep me nice and cozy. I can put it on over PJs, which I have done, and that makes it perfect for just kind of lounging around for a slower morning on the weekends. So yeah, I feel like this is a very nice casual sweater to fit really into like everyday, anytime wear. The yarn I have not talked about yet. I purchased this yarn during a sample sale that Purl Soho was having, I think in 2023. It was like a spring clean out sale of some discontinued yarns or colors. And so this color was one of the discontinued ones. I had mentioned in a previous episode that I call it my wombat sweater because I feel like this color looks like a wombat. It's like a neutral brown with purple undertones, but it's also kind of grayish. It is heathered, so it's got some depth to it, and I love it. It is something that I find easy to pair with anything. I feel like it's really easy to wear with jeans. And this color, yeah, it's really pretty. And I think this will forever be called my wombat sweater, even though it is officially called the Courage Henley. Back to the yarn. I used Purl Soho's knitting yarn. This is the sample color 003. I purchased it for $9 US per 100 grams. It is 100% non-superwash merino wool at 219 yards for 100 grams. This blooms beautifully and knits up really well as a worsted weight gauge. And I have knit I've knit 2 other sweaters with this yarn before, and they've held up really well. I ended up using 432 grams or 946 yards of yarn, and I believe that is within the recommended amount. The estimate is 995 yards of worsted weight yarn for the size 2, so I came in a little bit under that. I feel like I am all over the place today. I probably should have given myself some sort of order on how I talk about each project so that I wouldn't feel so scattered. So I'm sorry if my brain is taking you zigzagged and up and down and all over. So apologies. So I realized in the beginning of this episode that I forgot to mention that I won't be going into works in progress today because of the large amount of finished projects we have to go through. So, spoiler alert, there is no works in progress section. And with that, let's just keep going with the finished projects. Since we are talking about sweaters, I would love to share with you another sweater that I have finished. This is one I started in November of 2023. Are you ready? I'm so excited about this. Dun, 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 dun. This is the Strange Brew sweater for our daughter who is 8 years old. Now I started this when she was 7 and I love how it turned out and she does too, and it fits just perfectly. I followed the recipe. So Strange Brew, if you are not familiar with it, it is a book by Tin Can Knits, and it has a bunch of different patterns in the book as well as recipes for creating your own color work sweater, hat, cowl, all different yarn weights, all different sizes, baby through adult. And I just think that book is a very valuable resource, and I have made multiple things from it. I've used it as a reference book. I've followed the patterns in it, stitch counts, all of it. It's amazing. I highly, highly recommend that book. And if you have the hard copy book, you also get access to the digital copies, and that is super useful. Here is a sweater that I followed the stitch counts for, and I created my own color work yoke. I cast on the 6 to 8 year old size on the top because I knew I wanted the neckline to come in a little bit more. Gathering information from a lot of the other pictures in the projects, it seemed like the neckline was a little bit wider, and so I cast on for a smaller size on top. I knit a longer amount of ribbing on the top so that I could fold it down and knit it to the cast on edge. This creates a little more structure, and then if it gets more stretched out over time, it basically creates a casing for me to put elastic in. I can just weave it in or thread it in through one of the holes between the stitches, and it can have a little stretch to it but still hold it together. And so that's a nice structured neckband. And then I did this color work yoke section, and I increased to the 8 to 10 year old size. So the yoke depth is to the 8 to 10 year old size, and I believe I followed the 8 to 10 year old size length for everything else. Sleeves, I might have just had her try it on and then knit to where I thought would work out. And she wanted her sleeves extra long so that they covered part of her hand. And then if she didn't want her hands covered, she could have the sleeve cuffs folded up, which creates an extra cozy wrist, but also gives the opportunity for growing into the sweater and wear it for more than 1 year. And It's so soft. I used Knit Picks DK Swish, which is a superwash merino yarn, and for the main color it is Karma Heather, so it's a very vibrant pink, cool leaning purple. And then I used Haze Heather, which is like a smoky lavender color in the color work, and then I held Knit Picks Fingering Stroll Double, which is a light fingering weight yarn, for the highlighter yellow color, which I believe is a discontinued color. I think the highlighter color gives it a little more of a modern twist, and the two-toned purples just, they don't like mute it down, but it gives it a little more of a subtle color work look to it, which is then balanced out by this neon yellow. And I love how it looks. The rounded part on the top gives it a little bit of a lacy effect, like a lace scalloped effect. And then these X's or butterflies are along here. And then the highlighter yellow are like sunshine rays. And I just think it looks so pretty, and she just loves it, which just warms my heart, and she wants to wear it every single day. It is super cute with leggings. It goes well past her hips, and I also did a tubular bind off on the cuffs and the hem to match the fold over collar on the top, so they all have a rounded edge to them. Yarn that I used in this project was 238 grams of the main color, and then about 13 grams of this Haze Heather and 16 grams of the Stroll Fingering. So in total it came out to be about 267 grams of DK weight yarn. I guess the highlighter yellow's fingering weight held double, but in total the entire sweater weighs 267 grams. It is so cozy, it is so warm, and it is just so pretty to look at. I showed you a bunch of garments, and I totally didn't mention any of the make-alongs. I think the Current Henley was finished before some of these make-alongs started, but I just want to quickly mention, so I don't forget, there is the Sweater Weather Knit Together hosted by Emily of the Botanical Knitter, and dates will be here on the screen so I don't mess them up. And then the Jethro cardigan I knit as part of Cece at Stitch Witch Crafts make-along, which is the Year of the Cardigan make-along, and that runs through the end of 2024. And if you want the details, rules, any of those guideline things, I recommend going and checking their accounts out. I don't believe they're all just hosted on Instagram. Some of them are on Instagram and Ravelry. Some of them are just on Instagram. You'll have to find the details out for there. But I will have their handles in the description box below this video, and hopefully have shown something here on this screen so that you can check it out if you are interested. Let's move on to socks. And speaking of socks, Denise of Earth Tones Girl is currently hosting the Falling Leaves Sock Knit-Along. I believe she mentioned this was the 5th year, 6th year, something like that, of hosting this knit-along, and it is just so much fun. It is all the fall inspiration. I have 2 pairs of socks to share with you. I cannot remember if either of them were shown last time. I know one of them was. These are my Halloween socks. I roughly followed the Socksploration Shadow Wrap Heel sock pattern. I say roughly because I don't actually refer to the pattern anymore. It's memorized. And so it's probably the same, but there might be some differences. I just don't know what those differences are. But I love how these socks turned out. This is using Knit Picks Hawthorne fingering weight yarn, which I feel like is a heavier fingering weight or lighter sport weight yarn. So I use a US 1.5, which is a 2.5 millimeter needle. I like to knit my socks on 9-inch circulars. And then for the toes, I switched to 32-inch magic loop. The contrast heel here is also the same base, but it is called Contessa. And then the main yarn is called Brooklyn. And I will hopefully have a picture here on the screen so you can see what the yarn looked like prior to caking up. But it is like mostly of this dark charcoal purple color, and then it's got this splash of magenta, which knits up into these really fun stripes. I really love using variegated yarns for socks because it is really fun to see how the color pools up, and I feel like socks are a small canvas that can be a fun way to play with different colors, especially if you may or may not want to wear bright colors that have pooled in different ways as a garment, but in socks, I think that's super fun. I ended up using 62 grams of the main color and about 5 grams of the contrast color. I wear a US 7 or 7.5 women's shoe, and these fit really well and super comfortable, and I love them a lot. The second pair of socks I'd like to share with you are a pair of socks for my husband. This is part of my Operation Fill the Husband's Sock Drawer project for year 2024. On average, it would be 1 pair of socks per month, and this is pair number 8. Here we are. These are perfectly autumnal. I loosely followed the classic DK sock pattern by Summer Lee in the Sock Project book. That gauge is at 6 stitches per inch using a US 3 or 3.25 millimeter needle. And I held 2 yarns together. One is a self-patterning yarn and the other one was a solid. I don't have the yarns here on hand with me. One of them was the Regia 4-ply. I think it was something to do with cardamom multi, I think was the colorway name. And the other one was a heathered red, also a Regia 4-ply, and that one was garnet heather or something like that. Both of these yarns I would classify as workhorse yarns. I have never had to mend a sock that used this kind of yarn. I feel like it holds up really well, it washes really well, and it's just very hard wearing. It is not as soft as merino, which is probably also why it's harder wearing, but with it held together, I feel like these socks are going to be indestructible. I did use the 9-inch circulars to knit until I got to the heel flap and gusset, and in that portion, I like to knit my heel flap using double pointed needles while the front instep stitches are held on the 9-inch circulars. And then when I am picking up to do the gusset portion, I will put them back all on the 9-inch circulars and then just continue knitting until I get to the toe. And then I like to switch to 32-inch magic loop. Now, that may not be the most efficient way to knit socks in terms of having multiple kinds of needles, but I have them all and I like the process of knitting with them all in those sections, and so that's just what works for me. I don't think you have to do it that way. You could knit the whole thing on double pointed needles. You could knit the whole thing on magic loop. You could possibly knit the whole thing on 9-inch circulars, although that might be really difficult at the toe. Maybe if you had 2 9-inch circulars, you could do that at the toes. But that's just what works for me. I do not switch around when I'm doing a shadow wrap heel, but when I'm doing like a heel flap and gusset, I just really like knitting that heel flap flat using double pointed needles. I don't know, I like doing it that way. So that's what works for me. These socks, I used a total of 110 grams. I don't think I have anything else to say about these socks, but I am very excited about them, and I have the 9th pair for his sock drawer started. I do have some fingerless mitts that I've finished recently, but I have recorded a video on fingerless mitts and featured them there, so I will direct you to that video, and I talk about why I love fingerless mitts so much and the practical purposes of fingerless mitts and why I like them for gift knitting, and I feature a couple different patterns that I have knit in that video. So it isn't a compilation video where you get ideas of a lot of different patterns. It just happens to be the ones that I have knit from. And so if that is something that is interesting to you, I would head on over there. We are going to talk just a little bit about eats and reads. I am starting to run out of time, and so I do have a couple of other finished projects to share with you. They are mostly hats, so I think I'm going to save that for the next episode, and we'll just talk about those all together then. I have made 2 pies in the last month. I think it's been about a month since we last chatted. I think it was still in October, but it was like the first week of October, and now we're at the very end of October. And so since then, I cook every day. I bake every day, almost every day. Well, maybe that's a stretch. I cook every day for sure, and I bake definitely every week. And so in that time, I have made a lemon meringue pie when we went over to our neighbors for dinner, and I'll have a picture of that here on the screen. I use the all butter flaky pie crust recipe from Smitten Kitchen, and then the lemon meringue pie part, I think that's just from a Better Homes and Garden cookbook. I believe that's what I use. And then I've also made a chocolate pudding pie recently, and that whole thing is from Smitten Kitchen. I will link to what I can link to in the description box below this video, but I usually cook from a cookbook, like a physical cookbook, and so there's nothing to link to. But I will put the name of the cookbook in the description box or the link to a digital recipe if possible. I've also made the pineapple buns from the Milk Bread cookbook recently, and for those who are unfamiliar with pineapple buns, there's actually no pineapple in the bun. It's just because that top layer crackles in the oven to look like a pineapple, and it is an enriched dough, and it's soft, fluffy, delicious. And so when I made up a batch of those, I think it comes out to be a dozen. I had my brother come pick some up for him and my sister-in-law, and then my parents were in town, so I had them come pick it up. And yeah, so it was really nice to have that dozen of pineapple buns shared with my family, and everybody got to enjoy them. On to reads. I have 2 to talk about right now. One of them is Castle in the Air by Diana Wynne Jones. It was published January 1st, 1990. It is 298 pages. It's the second book to Howl's Castle, and I had read that one earlier. And this one, I have to say, did not draw me in. I read maybe 10 pages into the book, and I was like, I think I'm okay. And so it's nothing on the book. Sometimes it just has to do with my mood, what I'm into at the time, but I wasn't drawn in. I didn't really feel like I wanted to know what's next, and I have zero problem with not finishing books. I feel like there are so many books out there, and if I am just not into it, I'm okay with returning it to the library. I do get all of my books from the library, and so I just return it and get a different one. So that book is classified as middle grade fantasy, fiction, adventure. And like I mentioned, I didn't feel invested, and so I returned the book. Another book that I kind of read this past month is A Song to Drown Rivers by Anne Liang. And this was published very recently, October 1st, 2024. It is 336 pages. As far as I know, it is a standalone book. I don't think it mentioned anything about any sequels or anything, and I feel like it ended like a standalone book. This is fantasy, historical fiction, romance, classified as adult, mythology, romantasy. It's inspired by a famous legend from the 4 beauties of ancient China. It goes through themes of womanhood, war, sacrifice, and love. I personally found that it had some inconsistent pacing. I would have wished for more character development. It was classified as an adult book, but parts of it read very young adult to me. The main characters are in their 20s, and so I think that leads to the adult part, and there are some more adult themes, but I feel like some of the things just weren't discussed as in depth as they could be for a book that's classified as adult fiction. I also feel like I had some expectations of it to be more of a high fantasy, epic fantasy novel, given what story it was basing it off of or inspired by. So when you're inspired by a famous legend, I feel like there's kind of a build-up, an expectation as to what to expect, and I just didn't feel like I got that from the book. It was still an enjoyable read. It just didn't quite reach that like epic level that I was looking for. I am currently reading another book. I did not write it down, so of course I don't remember it right now. I will flash a picture of it here on the screen, and depending on when I'm here again, I will talk about it. I do have a quick food for thought section for you today, and this is, again, something that you can use as a homework assignment if you want to, but you definitely don't have to. I wanted to talk a little bit about random acts of kindness and how we can kind of turn that a little bit into intentional acts of kindness and basically doing things that benefit the other person. So what the other person may need or want versus what we think that person needs or want. So it isn't totally random, maybe unexpected, but definitely intentional. And I feel like that can be so important. Just doing something to make yourself feel good is totally different than doing something else to make the other person feel good. And sometimes the things are mutual, but not always. And I feel like this is something that I've been talking a lot with my children about recently as well. And there have been acts of kindness towards me recently that made me feel really good, and they filled my need. And I have been intentionally putting that forward to others as well. And I feel like you can really create that ripple effect that spreads this positive energy to other people. And you just never know when someone might really, really need that. It can be really small, it can cost nothing, or it can cost something, but just intentionally doing that, I feel like can really make a big difference in someone's life. So something to think about. It can be related to making. It could not be related to making. If you've been here for some time, there were episodes back, maybe a couple of years, where I talked about being a day maker and making someone's day. So that's related in there as well. So with that, cheers to being creative. I hope you are doing well, taking good care of yourselves, your loved ones, and your neighbors, and I will talk to you next time.